Tonight, touchdown in Guatemala, the vice president's first foreign trip since taking office.
Our border is wide open. Illegal immigration is skyrocketing.
Amid criticism of the White House plan to stem the humanitarian crisis at the border. Plus,
there was too much of a tendency early on to dismiss this possibility of a laboratory leak.
The latest on the lab leak theory around the origin of COVID-19. And
we don't need to be divided any further.
Throwing a wrench in the Democratic agenda, Senator Joe Manchin makes a stand in the name of compromise. And
join us in remembering the anniversary of D-Day. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Vice President Kamala Harris on the ground in Guatemala. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm Eric Phillips. A major diplomatic test. That's what some are calling the vice president's first foreign trip.
With stops in Guatemala and Mexico, her goal to address some of the root causes of migration from Central America, hoping to discourage some people from coming to the U.S.
CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke with our top story tonight.
The president's trip comes as record numbers of migrants continued across the U.S.-Mexico border, something that many Republicans and former President Donald Trump himself blame solely on the Biden administration.
You look at our border is wide open. Illegal immigration is skyrocketing at a level that we've never seen before. And this is over a period of a few months. America is being demeaned and humiliated on the world stage.
It's been nearly 3 months since Biden assigned Vice President Harris to focus on slowing migration from Central America. Republicans pushed for her to visit the U.S. southern border, where as of early May, officials were holding more than 22,000 unaccompanied minors. Instead, aides say she's been meeting virtually with key immigration players in an effort to put together the administration's official strategy. Tuesday marked Harris's first in-person action as she sat down with Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei.
The reason I am here in Guatemala as my first trip as Vice President of the United States is because this is one of our highest priorities, and I came here to be here on the ground to speak with the leader of this nation around what we can do in a way that is significant, is tangible, and has real results. And I will continue to be focused on that kind of work as opposed to grand gestures.
The Biden administration has proposed $4 billion in aid to Central America over the next 4 years, with an additional $310 million already committed toward humanitarian relief and food insecurity. The hope is that will lead to economic stability and curb migration.
And I want to emphasize that the goal of our work is to help Guatemalans find hope at home. At the same time, I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
While Harris plans to continue working on this economic strategy, she also emphasized cracking down on corruption, which has undermined U.S. aid in the past. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Caitlin. Meanwhile, tonight, the possibility of a lab leak as the source of the coronavirus pandemic is gaining traction. A pair of scientists writing in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that the science points to a Wuhan lab leak. Quote, "The fact that the coronavirus, with all its random possibilities, took the rare and unnatural combination used by human researchers implies that the leading theory for the origin of the coronavirus must be laboratory escape." Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice on Sunday also addressing more credence to the theory that COVID-19 originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
There was too much of a tendency early on to dismiss this possibility of a laboratory leak. Some of the evidence was right in front of our faces. We know that there were State Department diplomats who inspected, so to speak, that laboratory and came back and said that the safety practices were substandard.
The Biosafety Level 4 lab in Wuhan is the only one of its kind in China and one of only a handful in the world. 3 Wuhan lab researchers fell ill with COVID-like symptoms back in November of 2019. And here with us now is for some medical perspective, Dr. Marty Makary, a professor of health policy and management at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and the author of the book, The Price We Pay: What Broke American Healthcare and How to Fix It. Dr. Makary, welcome. It's great to have you with us. So this lab leak idea was largely dismissed last year, and now we have lawmakers calling for a full-blown investigation. You were actually one of the few people in the medical field who said this could be a possibility.
Well, Jenna and Eric, good to be with you guys. It was very clear to me beyond a shadow of a doubt back in the spring of last year, and I said publicly on television that an infected lab worker at the Wuhan Institute of Virology had likely come to the hospital. The doctors originally were detained. The lab is just 5 miles from the hospital. And a 2018 inspection report showed that the conditions were so bad there, it was basically the equivalent of doing dangerous research in a dental office, to quote the report. Since then, no lab samples have been turned over by the Chinese government. No zoonotic source has been identified. And now we have all the information we need. It's no longer a lab hypothesis. It's the default conclusion from the circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, and you were sounding the alarm early. What about the potential of the malpractice of China? If they had been more transparent, could that have saved lives?
Eric, people have a right to be angry right now. If you think about the consequences here, this is the largest liability or malpractice case in the history of the world. So people have a right to get more answers, and we're not going to get it from a full investigation. Be careful when you hear politicians posturing for a full investigation. We have all the data we're going to get right now, and the conclusion is very obvious.
Well, let's talk about herd immunity. I know in your book you talk about natural immunity, and you say, this is an important factor that shouldn't be discounted.
That's right, Jenna, and I'll have an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal later this week talking about natural immunity. It's one of the biggest failures of our medical establishment to dismiss natural immunity. It's about half the country. And if you have it, it turns out the data has come out even this week with 2 big studies showing that it works, it's durable, you may not need the vaccine, and it's probably long-lasting. It's probably lifelong. So when you dismiss natural immunity, you see only 63% of adults in America are vaccinated. The road to get to 85% is a dire situation. It requires mandates and kids getting vaccinated and demonizing those who are hesitant. But recognizing that half of the unvaccinated have natural immunity, it explains why we're at herd immunities now and cases are plummeting.
Yeah, Dr. Makary, you take on the medical establishment in your book. What lessons can leaders like Dr. Fauci and others learn from this pandemic?
Well, Eric, I'm a cancer surgeon. I spend most of my time in public health research, but I'm reminded frequently how life is short. And one important thing as a leader in the medical field or anywhere is humility. We didn't see that. He got so many things wrong, and we all make mistakes, but the principal job of that position is to warn us of a pandemic and tell us how to manage it. We didn't get the warnings. And then once it happened, I wrote the first article calling for universal masking in the New York Times. Why didn't we hear that from our medical leadership? That was something where I think it would be helpful for him to say, I got it wrong.
Dr. Makary, there are kind of growing calls within the GOP to oust Dr. Fauci. What about that? Do you think that's fair?
Look, I think people are very frustrated right now, and they're looking at the gain-of-function research, and they're angry because some of this is research that we funded. Now, we can't say for certain it was gain-of-function research, but we know that there was interest in gain-of-function, and it certainly makes sense, especially based on the Wall Street Journal article today, that the duplicate CGG genetic sequence in the virus suggests it was manipulated. That's what the scientists wrote about today. I think people are angry right now. I just would caution people against doing something that doesn't really have any impact on the future. We shouldn't be going after one individual. We should move on.
Yeah, and to your point, you had mentioned, masks and how you were one of the first people really very early on to call for universal masking. I'm curious, where do you stand on masks today? And, are they still needed in some situations?
Look, SARS-CoV-2, which is COVID-19, spreads just like SARS-CoV-1, or SARS, airborne aerosolized virus. That's what Dr. Fauci and the giant groupthink in the medical establishment got wrong. But now the pandemic is really over. The number of daily cases of COVID are 1/50th the number of daily cases of flu in the middle of a mild flu season. We need to move on. We need to reestablish a human connection. We've got to address the effects of profound loneliness and rebuild communities.
All right, Dr. Marty Makary, thank you so much. It's great to have you on.
We appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
And coming up, the wrench in Democrats' plans. Senator Manchin insisting on bipartisan compromise.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back. It's now or never for President Biden's progressive agenda, and it's looking more and more like never. The president has declared June a month of action on Capitol Hill.
So who's standing in his way of his signature legislation passing? Well, members of his own party. And what kind of blowback are they suffering? Dale Hurd explains.
Joe Biden has called June a month of action on Capitol Hill. But as the Senate returns to session today, much of his signature legislation is in danger of failing, thanks to a few centrist Democrats. And it means the For the People Act, the massive elections reform package Democrats have proposed, won't pass. And the filibuster likely will prevent other legislation like gun control and the Equality Act from even making it to the Senate floor for a vote. The infrastructure bill is still bogged down, with both sides divided over traditional infrastructure and so-called people infrastructure like paid leave and child care. The president is pointing the finger at Democratic Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona for the lack of progress on his agenda.
I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends.
Manchin came out against the For the People Act this weekend, calling it too divisive.
And I've always been about bipartisanship. I've always tried to work in a bipartisan way, and I've voted in a bipartisan way in the last 10 years of the Senate. So I'm doing what I have always done. Let's unite this country. We don't need to be divided any further.
Manchin wrote in a home state newspaper that the voting bill was about seeking partisan advantage. He's now under attack by the progressive wing of his own party, with Congressman Mondaire Jones tweeting that Manchin's op-ed might as well be titled, Why I'll vote to preserve Jim Crow. Frustrated progressives want to do away with the filibuster, but Manchin and Sinema say they won't support such a move. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And here with us now, our very own chief political analyst, David Brody. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. Now, over the weekend, as we just mentioned in that story, Senator Joe Manchin made it clear that he would not vote for the election reform legislation called the For the People Act, nor will he support doing away with the filibuster to pave the way for Democrats to go it alone. How much of this will affect the dynamic on Capitol Hill?
Well, it affects quite a bit. And let's just take a step back, because a lot of people are talking about how Manchin won't support the For the People's Act, which obviously is true because Manchin said it. But the other part of that in the op-ed over the weekend is that he won't support the legislative filibuster. And that changes the dynamic in Capitol Hill because, as you mentioned, Eric, at the top of this segment, there is a desperation by Democrats to want to get all of this legislation passed through the legislative filibuster. In other words, change the rules. Instead of 60 votes, make it 50 votes and cram it all through. D.C. statehood, the Equality Act, For the People's Act, all of it. But the fact that Manchin's not going to go there and Kyrsten Sinema is not going to go there, she said something along those lines last week, means that Democrats are in a pickle. And where this is now going is a fight between the progressives, who are frustrated with Joe Manchin. I mean, in essence, Joe Manchin has become Mitt Romney. That's pretty much. He is not a rhino, he's a dino, Democrat in name only. And that's where the Democrats are right now.
Yeah. Of course, Democrats and President Biden would love to pass something on infrastructure. Senator Lindsey Graham has said it would be a done deal if they would, kind of keep it to what traditionally has been called infrastructure. David, though, it seems with each day, the idea of getting something done here is less and less likely. Is infrastructure still possible?
Well, let's be clear. The infrastructure deal between Republicans and Democrats looks like it is not possible, that they are not going to come to an agreement. However, that does not mean that infrastructure itself is dead, because what the Democrats have in their hip pocket, what they believe they have in their hip pocket, is a way to get infrastructure done through budget reconciliation. So we're talking about all of this maneuvering between Republicans and Democrats, and we're going to see if it all works out. But if it doesn't, we go on to, I guess the Democrats would call it the bonus round. And the bonus round means going ahead and trying to get infrastructure done their way. In other words, roads, bridges, tunnels, internet, and all of the social programs that they want, adding up to about $2.7 trillion or so. The Democrats may try to just pass that through as it relates to 50 votes and budget reconciliation. So that's the race in the hole. In other words, if the negotiations don't work out with Republicans, they'll say, okay, we'll go it alone for 50 votes. The question, though, then at that point is how much that'll come back to haunt them in the midterms in 2022. It's a big, big gamble.
Yeah, less than a minute left here, David. There may not be bipartisan support for that whole infrastructure situation, but there is support in the Senate for a bill that could pass as soon as tomorrow, aimed at improving America's manufacturing and technological edge against China. Why does this effort seem to be able to gain steam on both sides of the aisle?
Well, because as much as the Republicans see the Democrats as the enemy, and as much as the Democrats see the Republicans as the enemy, Republicans and Democrats both see China as the bigger enemy. And that's the answer. And so, in essence, this bill, and there's a lot to it, but the bottom line is it's going to invest money, basically a Make America Better bill. Another America getting money for not infrastructure, but for certain biomedical research, AI technology, that type of thing, invested into American companies to be competitive with China. So that's the reason why this can get bipartisan support quickly, because China is the biggest enemy, and Republicans and Democrats don't have to fight each other so much. They all agree that China is a major threat.
Yeah, common cause in China. All right, David Brody, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
You too.
When we come back, remembering D-Day 77 years later, CBN News speaks with President Ronald Reagan's son. You're watching Faith Nation.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
And ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
a 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Tonight, remembering D-Day. 77 years ago Sunday, the Allies turned the tide against Axis forces in World War II.
Veterans and military officials at the American Cemetery in France paid tribute Sunday to the more than 150,000 Allied troops who landed on the beaches of Normandy to fight for freedom. Over 4,000 American, Canadian, and UK troops lost their lives, many of them while storming the beaches in the largest amphibious military operation in world history. Allied forces braved rough weather and fierce gunfire. CBN News international news director and senior international correspondent Gary Lane spoke with President Ronald Reagan's son, Michael Reagan, about the importance of marking this day in history.
Why is it important that we remember them and honor their sacrifice?
It's important that we remember it. It's important that we read our history and know our history and know the heroes that they were, that bailed out of planes, over Normandy. It's great to know the history and know the stories of these men that bailed out of these planes and ended up saving the world. If we don't remember history and study history, then we're going to repeat it. And that's proven time and time again through our history.
And I had the privilege of reporting from Washington as CBN News national security correspondent during your father's presidency. And on June 6, 1984, he became the first U.S. president to visit Omaha Beach, Normandy, for D-Day ceremonies. He gave 2 historic speeches that day talking about things that are worth dying for: freedom, democracy. And he said the troops who stormed those beaches were liberators, not conquerors. Let's listen to a short clip from the speech he gave at the cemetery.
This land is secure. We are free. These things are worth fighting and dying for. We will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared, so we may be always free.
So how concerned are you, Michael, that young Americans, I'm thinking millennials and Gen Zers, don't really know about their sacrifice, the price that many paid for our freedom? After all, I know these veterans will pass. Will we lose the memory of what happened on D-Day? Are we losing the Judeo-Christian values of sacrifice and service? What do you think?
If we don't instill it in our children, we can't expect someone else to do that. I was playing golf with a 25-year-old young man before I raised that flag at Normandy. I was in L.A. playing golf, and I told him what I was ready to do. And he was 25 years old, had no idea why there was even an American cemetery at Normandy. And I thought, he's really the normal, not the abnormal. And I said to him at the 18th hole, I said, did you think D-Day is when your report card came home? He had no idea. I go to France, they love America. All those countries that were freed by American soldiers and are still being freed love America. The problem is Americans forgot to love America.
What else can be done? What do we need to do?
Say thank you every single day, every time you see a vet, no matter what war. Thank them. And don't thank them 3 days a year. Thank them every day of every single year. You see, when
You see a vet at breakfast or at lunch or at dinner, having dinner, buy him a meal, pay for it. You see a police officer, a fireman, anybody who's serving and willing to give their life for you and me to have freedoms and to be safe. The little things that you can do to say thank you very much for what you're willing to do, the love that you have for my city, my state, my country. I want to thank you for it.
And we want to thank you, Michael Reagan, political consultant, speaker, author, and son of President Ronald Reagan. We appreciate you, Michael. Thank you for joining us and for keeping your father's legacy and the legacy of those D-Day veterans alive. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Finally tonight, what's in a name? For the newest member of the royal family, a lot of family heritage.
Over the weekend, Prince Harry and Meghan welcomed Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor to the world. While she may not hold a princess title, Lilibet's name is full of royal history. Lilibet is a nickname held by Queen Elizabeth, and Diana is the name of Harry's mother, Princess Diana, who died tragically in a car crash. Lilibet is the Queen's 11th great-grandchild and is 8th in line to the British throne behind her brother Archie, who just celebrated his 2nd birthday. Congratulations to Harry and Meghan on their new arrival. Certainly a big name for a little girl with a lot of history.
Yes, a sweet family. We do wish them all the best.
We'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Thank you so much for joining us.